Who are you?
My name's Jason Waite. I wrote and directed and voiced a cartoon called Starship Goldfish, with the pilot of it released in 2018. And since then, I've mostly been writing on television shows, waiting for my star to rise. That's it, I think, really.
What are the three things you value most in life?
Wow, that's a good one. That's a really good one. I see why people pause before they give their answers. I like the difference between what people say and what people think, especially in as regards media. It just shows, because it's like an echo. It's like it's a sound that comes back from far away. It shows the enormity of the space inside. It was something for a long time I thought was only in books, but you see it in television as well, you know. So there's that, because that is the essence of subtext. And that's kind of what we're going for in fiction. It's intention. So yes, so there's that. I also like sleeping a lot. I had a nap today. And just connections, really. Just feeling understood, or like somebody understands you, which I feel like another goal of, fiction, because there are elements of nonfiction in it, there are elements of ourselves in there. So to feel like you're not alone, because we're born alone, we die alone, and in between, it's just really nice to feel as though all of the, I don't know, junk thought and DNA that makes us and compels us to do things, that we're not alone in it, because it does feel very lonely. If you can just hear even something pedestrian, like it's always nice to open a new moisturizer or something, just little things like that. I feel like I value it more because it fades the older you get, because we get so used to things. We get to expect rather than to wonder. And things either meet or fall short of expectations, but wonder is, it's open. I'm not saying that as an absolute, but certainly true for me, because, you're a bit too experienced.
Tell me a memory which shaped you.
I think I must have been about maybe 14 or 15, and I had an English teacher at school, an Irish guy, actually. I think his name was Mr. Keogh, but I also think that could have been a gym teacher, and I really don't want to give any gym teacher any credit for something positive. He was my English teacher, and I submitted a short story, and it was some sort of James Bond inspired thing. It was basically just a video game in text. But he told me it was good. He said, "This is good. This is exciting. You put this together well." And it would have been very easy for him to say, "No, that's not very good, and it should fit this format," or any one of a number of things that must have certainly been wrong with it. But that encouragement snowballed. It told me that I could make good things, which is a really important lesson for a child to learn. So I suppose that.
What's your favorite color?
It varies. The longest sort of survivor has been sky blue. I'm in the suburbs and there's always someone screaming. Yeah, sky blue. It used to be orange because I loved Garfield as a kid. As my influences diversified, I moved on to sky blue.
Tell me in as much detail as you can about something you knew of which once existed and now does not.
Okay, so in the 90s, there was a drink in America called Orbits. And I learned about it from the Guinness World Records because I think it was a food and a drink at the same time, because it had these floating balls suspended in it. I don't know what they were made of. I think it was probably just some obscure part of the ingredients that's full of X's and Z's. But I knew of it. And my dad used to tour manage bands for a living. And he was on the Ozfest with a band called Pitch Shifter. And I asked him as a kid, I must have been about, I don't know, 12, get me some of this orbit stuff. I thought it was a really cool concept. I thought it was cool. Up and down America, he had told all of the roadies on this tour with him, hey, find this orbits drink, and nobody could find it anywhere. They were in, like, I think it was Indiana or somewhere silly, and they found it in a gas station and bought up their whole supply of it. And so by the time it had gotten back to me, the only bottles of Orbits left in America, it was well out of date, but I still drank all of them and they were disgusting. And that's the end. That's how that story ends. And it doesn't exist anymore. I'm assuming it's because it's disgusting.
What, if anything, is perfect?
There are just moments of some songs, aren't there? There's the moments where you sigh. You want the things that you listen forward to. I'm trying to think of a few. I'm not going to be able to think of any, am I? But there's just these moments where, I don't know what it is about music specifically that just manages to to capture a person's personality somewhere between the spacing of the notes and the tone that they lean into a word with. There's a song by Bobby Caldwell called "Do for Love," "What You Won't Do for Love." There are multiple moments in that song that have me swoon. Yeah, so if there is such a thing as anything perfect, I think the Japanese would tell you it's somewhere between a cherry blossom leaf petal falling from a tree and it landing on the floor, and just on the journey downward, it's perfect. But I don't know, I don't like things that if it's ephemeral, of course it's perfect. It was never going to be anything else. But if it's something you can listen to again, I think that's cool that it can be perfection.
Who is your favorite character from fiction of any kind? Why?
Say Spike Spiegel from Cowboy Bebop. I think the surest sign that you have a really solid character is that you can divide them into multiple characters and have those characters also be interesting. Because that's what happened in Samurai Champloo, the series that team made afterwards. Because you have Spike, who is reckless and wild and unpredictable, but he's also calculated and very skilled and professional. And you have this dichotomy in him, which makes the way that he behaves and reacts to the world always kind of interesting, if kind of sulky and teenagerish. And for Samurai Champloo, they split that into two Gestalt characters. You had Jin, who was professional and skilled and serious. And then you had Mugen, who was wild and reckless and unpredictable. And they carry the show as two different characters. And it seemed to me that Spike was split in two for those to appear. And not only that, but the way I think part of the heavy lifting for that is done with the story, because I don't know, I don't want to spoil Cowboy Bebop for anybody, but there's a moment right at the end of the series where he grabs onto your heart as he fades away, and it's like, oh god, that's never going to happen again. They're gone. Oh man. I know that's kind of like, I don't know. There's almost certainly better written characters, and there's almost certainly more fulfilling and real characters. But I like that. I like Spike because he exists in this kind of, it's like a camp in the theatrical sense rather than in the the behavioral sense. The world of Cowboy Bebop asks us to suspend our disbelief and puts us into this pulpy, world of future vice. And Spike is a perfect character in it. It's cyberpunk, really, if it's anything, right? It has more in common with Blade Runner than it does with any of the Wild West influences or jazz influences that you would notice on the surface. Yeah, so I'd say Spike.
There is a song called "The Devil Went Down to Georgia." Have you heard it?
Yeah.
Yeah. My favorite character from fiction of any kind is Johnny from that song. Because there's something specific about the way in which a person just doing what they're really good at against all the odds and defeating evil by just not even that, but being cocky about it. This kind of like, well, not only am I going to beat you and save my own soul, but I want a golden fiddle out of it as well. You stupid bastard. Like just kind of this cocky surety of success for good reason. I don't know if you call it like bravado, or there's something palpable about that sense that every character that's ever had that is as a character that like rips my heart. And I think that Johnny, because he is literally not described in any other way, there is no contextual clues or semantic content to his character more than just, I am a dude who was walking and the devil came across me and said, I'm going to take your soul. And like he was like, no, I'm going to play my fiddle and I'm going to beat you. And not only that, I'm going to beat you and you're going to give me something for the pleasure. It's wonderful. And at the present moment, that is my favorite character.
That's a good answer. I like that better than my answer.
So I watched like one episode of Cowboy Bebop. I thought it was incredible, and then never watched it again.
The first one is I would say far and away the best episode.
I really enjoyed it. Like I thought it was amazing. It was just one of those things where I kind of got carried away with other things in my life, which happens to me quite a lot when it comes to media. Like I'll be playing in something and enjoying something deeply, and then all of a sudden like something will happen and my attention is gone for like a moment, and by the time I get back to it, it's like well, I could do this, or I could just continue with the thing I was just doing.
Oh,
And
sure.
yeah, so I got like 70% into a lot of things, and don't. But anyway, what fascinates you?
Romance has always been really fascinating to me. I'm reading a book called Utopia Avenue by David Mitchell at the moment, and it's throwing coal into the furnace for me. He wrote Cloud Atlas that was developed into a film. He talks about there's a lot of like sci-fi and fantasy and spiritual fantasy in his work, but really all of his fantastical elements just fall under the umbrella of the unlikely. And romance doesn't escape from that. He has this one book called, I think it was Number 9 Dream. And I'm sitting with the book right now, and it will be printed on the inside cover. Oh, Ghost Written. Ghost Written was the name of that book. And it's about this Japanese teenager working in a music shop. And it's just a sort of coming of age tale. But there's a girl walks into the shop and she's browsing records. And for one reason or another, she really, sometimes you meet somebody and they just sort of reverberate. For me, that's whenever I meet someone else with ADHD. But in this case, he meets this girl and really vibes with her immediately. But then, of course, she leaves because he works in a shop and people don't stay in shops. And he obsesses about her for a while, I think a week plus. And the next time he sees her again, she's been feeling the same way that entire time and thinking about him and what he must be like and everything. And it's so unlikely, but it's fresh fruit. It's it sort of hones the edge of the way you look at the world, I think, to believe that the unlikely is possible. So that would be my answer: is romance.
I'm a hapless romantic. I believe so truly in the concepts of soulmates and like love at first sight, and like the biological basis for love. This is something that I learned recently, which is just it blew my mind. Very literally, our brains they're not lazy, they're efficient.
Mm-hmm.
And what we admire most in another person is what we don't have, the traits that we do not have. Because we're like, oh, this person is confident and sure of themselves and everything like that. And I'm, for some way or another, you may be outwardly confident, but inwardly you might be like looking for something, because as you know, we work on different levels, and sometimes internally we can have a turmoil that externally is not possible, or even cognitively is not possible. But something will happen and your inner self will be exposed for a moment, and you'll realize, oh, okay, actually maybe I'm not as sure of myself as I thought. Anyway, love is the act of valuing a person for traits that you do not have, because your brain literally goes, well, I could do all this personal work to get more confident, or I could just be in a partnership with this person and therefore have this trait on me. Phenomenal. And so instances of true love are instances where you have seen someone who physically and in some sort of manner have determined that their traits are the ones that you want. And scientists are still baffled as to like why the feeling is the way it is, because you don't have to feel anything more than just I want this thing. But we do. We feel appreciation, we feel longing, we feel these other emotions which are kind of predicated on that initial one. But it doesn't, none of this fact ruins love for me. In fact, it makes it a little bit more beautiful that, oh, I have viewed this person and adjudicated this person to have a trait that I don't have, that I want on a biological level. But on a cognitive level, they are the sun. They are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I'm going to write poems and songs and paintings about them, and appreciate them and obsess and stare at the ceiling, thinking of beautiful days that I am going to have with this person you may never speak to again. Like there's, of course, in a lot of romance movies, there's like two characters lock eyes in the subway in New York, and it's like the whole movie's about how they meet again and little things like that, and they're that parallel of like, I am going through this and I am also going through this, and we will work from there. So that resonates very, very deeply with me. The scary thing about that is the reason why people fall out of love is because they develop the traits that they have, and then their brain does a calculation where it's like, well, does this person make me a better version of myself, or have
Oh
I done
god.
everything I need to?
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely ended some relationships that way, where it's just like, hey, I would actually be better off. And it's like, oh, okay. It's a very utilitarian way of looking at
Exactly,
the
yeah.
act of understanding someone.
What is the most valuable thing you ever learned?
Yeah, I suppose a good first impression, because it, like you say, the human brain isn't lazy; it's efficient, and it's a labor-saving exercise to make a good first impression and then be yourself the rest of the time.
Because people will find reasons to like you. I totally agree with that. If you could name a hot sauce, what would you call it and why?
I would make a Thai hot sauce. I would have it as merch for Rage Against the Machine. It would be called Zack Della Rasha, with like sriracha.
Oh God, that is that is woefully brilliant. Congratulations.
Sorry.
What is your most prized physical possession?
I mean, it's gonna, and the obvious ones are like laptop, right? But right now, I have a plant that has nearly died a few times, and I keep cutting off infected roots and leaves, and it's still alive. And I am so terrified of overwatering it that right now it's looking a little pruny. But I think it's symbolic, It's like if I can keep the plant alive, then things can't be that bad.
What inspires you?
I think seeing people try is really cool. Like recently I watched a show, I think it's on Netflix, called Love on the Spectrum, and it's about people with these varying degrees of Asperger's syndrome trying to date in Australia, and they're always young people, sort of 20 to 25. And it was very, very moving. I watched it with a good friend of mine over Skype, and it was just very beautiful. Hearing their parents talk about them really brought on the waterworks, but just hearing them talk about themselves and what they would hope for, you could tell that there's no artifice about it. I mean, they were unguarded about their dreams, and I think there was you could tell there was just so much behind every sentence. There were 4 or 5 sentences unsaid for every sentence that was said, which I suppose links back to, one of the things that I like the most, sort of subtext. And just seeing people try and fail. I think it's one of Pixar's recommended storytelling bits of advice is you respect people the same or more for their attempts than for their successes. And I really believe that, because being a writer, or even just a person who makes things, there's there's a lot of self-doubt and failure, unless you started very, very young, in which case it's like having a fifth limb named talent. Yeah, it's really inspiring to see people try.
Did you ever have an epiphany? If so, what was it about?
Yeah, they have happened, but that's the thing about epiphanies, is that, people will say, oh yeah, I had this realization and my life was never the same. And I really envy that, because all of my epiphanies have lasted about half an hour, and they've been no less intense. It's just been like, oh my God, that's how people see me. Or like, oh my God, it turns out that, the things that I do have a lasting impact in the world. And they're not just things that exist in the moment that I'm saying or doing them, but they don't last for very long. Maybe because I'm very easily distracted. So yeah, I mean, either of those two if you like. But I think the nature of epiphanies, I mean, because it has a religious root, right? It's this bolt from above that lets you know the nature of things. I don't think I have that much truth waiting in me just to pop out. I think most of my epiphanies are from the outside in, and they're very hard to digest that way. No realizations that we have are ever really external, or at least the ones that we act on are never external. But there's more of them externally than there are inside, I feel. But then I've never tried acid, so.
If you could say all of your work had a theme, what would that theme be?
I suppose a person at odds with their environment. Sam from Starship Goldfish exists in the universe that's very, well, not very, but mostly adjusted. Space is just big gaps between dotted civilizations that have advanced past killing one another. And then you have somebody who shows up who's all insecurity and energy and is manic, and he wants to be loved, but he doesn't want anyone to get close to him, and he's just like a mess. That would be the theme, because I never really feel in place. And, everyone's around Sam in the show is hoping that he won't do some horrible, violent, awful thing that day, as he has all this rich kid wish fulfilling a suite of options ahead of him, like fly the ship here, or blow this up, or go and ruin this civilization's day, or some awful thing. I suppose the angle that the show develops on is his personal growth into being a better person. With Ghostworth, however, it's the same thing, except Sam is the environment that he's juxtaposed against. Yeah, so I would say a scene in my work, and something that I find it easy, at least, to write on as a theme, is juxtaposition.
I have been like a fan since it was called Sam Sweet Milk, and I still call it Sam Sweet Milk.
You can call it that if you like. That's cool.
Yeah, I don't. It doesn't click in my head. It's always Sam Sweet Milk in my head.
I think probably mine too. It's just not a very sci-fi name. It's one of those names that you have to. Because the thing about sci-fi is, sci-fi has a baked-in audience. If you have a show like, I don't know, 2.5 Men, it doesn't tell you anything about the show, right? But everybody understands a domestic situation, whatever, there's lots of relatable things there. But with sci-fi, it's so unrelatable that you need to have a sci-fi aspect in the title, really, as the first amount of advertising a person reading the title will get. So calling it Sam Sweet Milk, it just seemed like we were setting ourselves up for something difficult down the road.
Well, my show is called The Curiosity Project and does literally nothing to engender the philosophical feeling that I do, and I have yet to find a reason to care. I like the name The Curiosity Project, even though I've found out another podcast called The Curiosity Project, but I intend to be the best Curiosity Project.
I think with podcasts, you're always doomed to be. I mean, the format is it's set, right? It's audio for a period of time. I think that there's probably more than two. I wouldn't worry about it. Probably the same thing for Starship Goldfish. Is probably.
What makes you smile?
Like interactions between people. Like I'll be on the bus and I'll see a couple, and one will just adjust the other's hair, and I'll hear the Danish word for love. So yeah, I like being reminded that, and it takes the weight off. I think for creative type people, I don't know if I can speak for everybody, but certainly for me, there's a kind of, hey, I don't want to be anonymous thing about it, and that's very isolating, and it's a lot of pressure on the individual to not be anonymous, because we're 0.0000 something percent of the world's population. Of course we're anonymous, and it's a relief to see that other people are having big entire lives as well, and it's not just inside our heads.
How do you feel about death?
I've been thinking about it more lately. I think that death is what gives us substance. I think it's the font that life is written in. It's the mathematics underpinning everything, and it's very scary that one day I'll be gone, and I should be thinking about doing things that matter during that time. But then, of course, there's a definition of what matters. And, I look out into the garden and I see a smashed snail because it was raining the night before, and I went out walking to get my laundry in. And I think, well, no, maybe life doesn't really matter that much, and it's just a blip. And that, in the same way as seeing little snippets of the insides of other people's lives being a weight off, that's also a weight off, to feel like life isn't actually all that important in the grand scheme of things, because importance is something that we weigh upon it. Yeah, I've been thinking about death a lot lately. That's a funny question, because I've really been thinking about it. I haven't really been talking about it.
I've also been doing a lot of thinking about death. I think a lot of people have, just because of the circumstances of the time.
Oh yeah, that's probably what it is. Yeah, oh, that's reassuring.
For me, the reason why this question resonates is that I'm totally unsure of how I feel about death. I'm not sure if I'm deeply, truly terrified of the foundational assumption that one day I will no longer exist, and nothing I can do, no temple I can build, no entertainment I can give will ever stop that. And it can even be like one day I will just have an aneurysm and I'll just drop, and that's it. But there's also the part of me that's like, well, yeah, but if everything lasted forever, it would be kind of shitty, right? Like, if if I didn't have, like, to bring it back to your example earlier of, if the petal didn't fall off the tree, you wouldn't get any new petals. And if night didn't come, you wouldn't have any new days. And I'm sure there'll be people that'll come after me that, because I'm gone, there's no space for, that will be equally and beautifully themselves and resplendently wonderful. And during the time that I have between now and then, which is indeterminate, I can kind of do whatever I want because I'm going to die anyway. And
Yeah.
I have an opportunity then, and I've been given the gift of, like, I can treat people however I want, and I'm choosing to treat people with kindness and respect and care. And because of the
Hmm.
belief system that I have, because I want to treat people with kindness and respect, and because, like, I don't have to. I mean, you can live your entire life
Hmm.
as an asshole if you want to, but
Sure.
you you gain so much by having the dual perspective that you don't have to treat anyone well, but you can choose to, and none of it matters anyway. There will be, like, I don't know, none of none of my questions have ever kind of dealt with God, because I don't think it really matters, because no matter what, you are out of this area. Like, you are
Hmm.
gone. Either your soul goes to heaven, or you just cease to exist. So whatever
Hmm.
you do here does not make a difference. You have the autonomy to do that. And those are the dualities that I kind of, yeah, I store my entire life on, and wonder every now and again which one wins. And sometimes they do win, and I fall into these deep pits of, oh God, why am I doing this? To, actually, this is awesome. And I think it's about keeping a balance somewhere.
And there's something in creative. There's some death in creativity. There's certainly death inspired creativity because we're just kind of I heard it described once as you when you're born you're sort of in an expanse and you're just sitting there and the expanse seems to go on forever and it makes sense to just sit there and die because if the expanse goes on forever. But if you pick a direction and walk in it, well, isn't that better if you're going to die anyway? Maybe you'll find something there, but it's certainly more of an opportunity than sitting still, which is a very dim view of existence. But I think creativity is it's walking the plane. It's going out into the dark and seeing if anything's there. And yeah, I think about media a lot and what our stories mean for one another. And I think a lot of it, or at least the impact of it, and having people feel that they can relate to it, I think that's all about death. I think it's about reminding each other that we're not alone in this experience and we're all going to die. And we can not make things because we don't have the energy or we're not inspired. But when we do, people notice. And I don't know if there's necessarily value in that, but it feels good or positive, if not good. Yeah, I don't know if I have a fully formed thought on that, but I do think creativity is a desperate. It's like your life flashing before your eyes before you die. It's a movie before the end, creating things before death.
Tell me about something you learned recently that amused you.
So, a consortium of hedge funders and financiers and pension fund investors, and basically the sort of finance side of the Western world, has kind of unanimously agreed to divest from fossil fuels and start putting money into things like, not necessarily things that are carbon neutral all over, but things that help rather than hinder, because they're realizing now with the science that their pension funds are no good if they pay out on a dead planet. In the same way that militaries are planning for, like, okay, so it's going to make things a lot more complicated for us if certain countries are uninhabitable and there's mass exoduses because those are going to reach our shores eventually. So you have these very sane and logical people who are kind of above the level of government because they set the tempo, now turning around to governments and being like, okay, you need to change your shit up. And then the governments are actually listening. But they never listened before when it was just science or just people being like, hello, you work for me. Please stop us all from dying. It's only when you start fucking with their wallet that they're like, okay, cool. Yeah, all right, here we go. And I thought that was funny. It was like Satan being tapped on the shoulder by Super Satan, being like, hey, you're being a bit evil.
What is beautiful?
Truth is beautiful. I think secrets are beautiful because they're truths that never get sullied. Because when you say something, it gets judged or twisted or anything. But if you know something yourself to be true and it doesn't necessarily need anyone else's approval in order to remain being true, then that's a beautiful truth because it's pristine.
Would you describe yourself as cute and cuddly?
I don't know that I would actually. I don't know that I would describe myself as cute and cuddly because I lost 16 kilograms in the last year, so I'm not cuddly anymore. I know that's a very thin reading of cuddly, but you know what? I lost a shitload of weight. Yeah, I'm cute as fuck. Yeah, I would describe myself as like well fucking cute and a bit cuddly. Would you describe yourself as cute and cuddly?
Ooh. So here's the thing about these questions, right? I don't think about the questions when I'm for myself because I'm like,
Answer the goddamn question, Tessa.
okay, yes, I would. I am cute as fuck, and I'm also cuddly as fuck.
Hell fucking
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
Y5.
what do you mean? Why? Oh, wife. Ah, I get it. I was like, what the fuck? Why what? No, Wi-Fi. That's good. I like that. I'm gonna keep. Yes, I would. I would consider myself as cute and cuddly. Partly because estrogen causes two things. It causes skin to like smoothen out, and I didn't really have much acne anyway, but like my acne, my very little pimples to go away, and my skin to become like really soft and like ivory and weird and like lovely, and also it redistributes fat. So like I have like handles and hips and stuff, and like and it's like yeah, I can give myself like a good hug, and I I don't really like there is the weight thing in cuddly. Like, do you need to carry a certain amount of body weight to be cuddly? I don't think so. I actually judge cuddly based on huggability. So like if someone is like huggable, that's when they're cuddly. Like if a teddy is like really huggable, it's cuddly. That's in the same way. Like if you have a blanket, you could be cuddly in the blanket because it's like you're getting a hug.
Yeah, cuddly is a physical description rather than a state of being.
Yeah,
So we can forgive people for not always being cuddly. Like
Ex-
I'm all ribs and shoulders now, so I don't think of myself as cuddly anymore.
the thing about these questions, I don't answer them because I'm like I can't. If I answer them, I predispose what the guest is going to say. I'm like I can't do that because I'll be less good at my job if I answer these questions. And I do have
Ah,
answers. If I like, if I, because I had to create the question, I had to test out the questions. But I'm far more interested in what like people have to say because I think part of it is that there's like this deep-seated anxiety in me that I don't really have anything interesting to say. So it's like, I'll just facilitate and I'll see what happens. Um,
right. Well, if it helps, you've said some very interesting things so far today.
Thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. Um, I could like when I say that I have the deep rooted things, it's like when I'm around people that I feel comfortable with, I'm like, yeah, what I'm saying here matters and it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
this is a random stranger. These are random strangers who are listening to me. Like,
Mm.
what the fuck? Who the fuck am I? Like, uh, and
Yeah,
so
it's anxiety inducing it to know that somebody out there is going to develop a privately held opinion of you. But then on the other hand, it's as completely cut off from you as adoration. You know, there's not the mortifying ordeal of being known, to quote a meme that I read recently. But you know, somebody developing a private opinion of you doesn't have any bearing on who you actually are. So it's really sterile in that way, which is nice.
where do you feel safest?
Safest. I suppose it would be a time. When I lived with my grandmother some years ago, she had a corgi called Robin, and she had a cottage with this little sort of garden that was on a slope underneath a walnut tree. And in the mornings, I would go out with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and I'd just throw the ball for Robin, back when he was still alive, poor thing. And yeah, that was it. That was at peace, you know? I would sip, and then I would have one hand that wasn't slathered in a dog's mouth gore that, was sipping you know, I would be sipping with, and one that was slathered in a dog's mouth gore to throw a ball with, and that's my happy place. I don't go there a lot anymore because the dog's dead and I'm in a different country, but, yeah, I'd say that time and space, that freeze frame of my life would be a happy place.
If you were on a starship, what position would you hold?
Okay, so Do you watch Star Trek?
I do, yeah.
Picard is almost in this category, but really I'm talking about Kirk. Can you imagine James T. Kirk occupying any other position on that ship?
No.
That's it, right? He's shoots from the hip, oddly sexual and soft-spoken maverick, and you can't picture him in navigation or even in, maybe counseling or maybe a barman. Possibly because Kirk aligns with some American notion of the masculine in the 60s. But if I was on a ship at all, I'd want to be fucking captain. Or I would be like a prisoner in the brig for being too wild. Because I just don't think that I would have any place on that ship. I wouldn't deserve to be there unless I was a very confident, capable person with all my wits about me all the time. But then, to be honest, okay, I watched an episode of the original Star Trek recently with Kirk, and now I'm definitely going off subject, where he was, citing the legal codes of Starfleet. And maybe it's a very limited reading of early Star Trek to say that Kirk was kind of a maverick. If I was on a starship, yeah, I would like to be captain. But failing that, I would just like to write a story where I'm captain because that's safer.
What is a feeling or experience you've had which does not have a word that you wish did?
I was watching Moral Oral, the Adult Swim claymation series about an abused child in a podunk town and his awful family and the quiet tragedy of the lives of people who live there and their alcoholism and their sexual release, but it's a misplaced need for connection. But watching that show, a lot of people look back at their own childhood through its lens, and it was the feeling of just like regret for things that other people had done.
Do you think there is more good than bad in the world?
Yes, absolutely. I think that bad news is just more noteworthy. If we're in a cafe and we're all sitting around, we hear a plate smash somewhere, everybody looks to the direction of the plate smashing. If somebody proposes, it gets the same reaction. I just think the good is so mundane and domestic that it's unremarkable because there's so much of it. I mean, the universe set the conditions in which life could arise. How much more benevolent can we really ask it to be?
If you could give just one piece of advice, what would that be?
I don't know if I'm in a position to do that. I can give specific advice, but I don't know if I can give people advice on how to live their lives because I'm very good at. I give advice, but I rarely take my own advice, so I don't know if it's good or not. So a net positive would just be try. The word try. Try full stop.